Episode 5, Season 2. It's another one that's making me sit here and go, why couldn't they have made this their Season 1 debut? Like, if they could have made Season 1 this good, I don't think there would have been nearly as many complaints. But be that as it may, really good episode. I am going to spoil the whole thing. If you haven't seen it yet, pause, go watch, come back. This is your only warning. I don't do spoiler free. So give you a slight moment to pause, and we are off to the fall of all of Middle Earth. Um, this episode is really just about Sauron strengthening his grasp and extending his reach across all the peoples of Middle Earth. So we have a heavy theme throughout this episode with the dwarven rings, specifically because King Durin has a ring, and it just immediately sets about corrupting him. He starts off, he can hear and feel the stone, right? And so he's able to point to the miners directly. This is where we're going to find light. And they refuse to believe him at first. In his senate, he's like, don't dig there, Dad. That's a foundation wall. And he just goes, give me an axe. And he goes for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. This old dwarf, and he breaks through and has sunlight. And so everyone starts to believe him. And so he uses the ring for good, but the ring is corrupting him, and he ultimately starts to tax his citizens. It's a 50% tax. I get half of whatever you have. It's called a ring tax. And then on top of that, he invites all of the dwarven emissaries from the other kingdoms and says, I'll give all of your kings rings like this one, but only if they, swear fealty and pay a tax and all this other stuff. And sends them all back. So he's fallen completely to the dark side really quickly. Prince Durin um, wants to talk his dad out of it. His dad won't listen. He ultimately, without consent, is now the prince again. And he's like, my father's off the deep end, and um, begins to suspect that maybe something was wrong with the ring. Um, he confronts Celebrimbor, and Celebrimbor is basically just like, whatever, I am flawless. Any faults that exist, not I had nothing to do with. But that starts seeds in his mind about whether or not the seven could have been corrupted in some way, and he begins to have his doubts. And Celebrimbor eventually confronts Sauron, and they have this argument and debate about whether or not the fault is with Anatar and whatever he did during the process. And this leads to Anatar in his Sauron form. Well, actually, you and I, introduced this imperfection because we crafted these rings under the guise of deceit. What deceit? Says Celebrimbor. Remember that letter you sent back to the king? No, no, that's impossible. No, no. But he realizes that he did send that letter. He did, in fact, say those things to the king. The king has, in fact, received the letter, and Elrond. Well, we'll get to that. Um, um, Celebrimbor, realizing the deceit and going, "Oh my goodness, what have we done?" This is the first moment of what have we done. But then there's this argument of, well, we need to create the nine for men to save mankind and to right this wrong. And we can choose the kings of men. Elendil, Beren, men of stature like this. Um, and Celebrimbor says, "No, I'm not going to do it." And of course, this pisses off Anatar, and he decides, well, he's like, fine, I'll just go do it myself. And so Celebrimbor kind of washes his hands of it. He goes off and, Sauron goes off and does his own thing with the forge. And of course, the first ring they make, um, the blonde elf hair, the blonde elf girl who's been like Celebrimbor's assistant or something, um, she puts on a ring, and they just go. They hear this ruck. Celebrimbor hears this ruckus, and he goes downstairs, and there's like tools flying around. There seems to be some invisible force at work here within the forge, and then he realizes that it's this girl wearing a ring, and they take the ring off. She becomes visible, and she's like, "I was in another place with mist and all this other stuff, and I saw a figure of flame," and she's terrified. And Celebrimbor gets pissed off and, what did you do? You added more mithril. What? This is crazy. And he's like, you're not going to be able to do it without my help. And then as he's getting ready to offer some assistance, um, the soldiers show up from Gil-galad. Um, and was it Gil-galad? I forget what the soldiers were. That part I don't remember. Can't remember if they were from there or from the gates. I don't know. That was when Durin arrived. Thinking something different. Don't mistake that. That's when Durin arrived and interrupted him. But ultimately, we end up back at that same conversation of Celebrimbor and Anatar. Once this corruption has been revealed, um, the decision to forge ahead with the making of the Nine, to right the wrongs that they've done with the Seven, and to perfect everything. And so Celebrimbor is back at the wheel again. But as he does so, he has this moment where he goes back up to his office, and Anatar is giving this speech in front of the elves, and you can see that the elves are starting to follow Anatar, not Celebrimbor. And Celebrimbor has this moment. He's up there in his office, like shaking with terror and dread on his face, because he's committed them to, like, you know, we're not going to tell the king. We're just going to forge ahead and fix this mistake so that the king doesn't have to know anything about it. And is realizing that he's, like, basically beyond the point of no return at this point, and also suspecting so many things without knowing for sure. That's that part of things. Um, the Balrog awakening. We haven't seen the Balrog yet. We've heard the Balrog, and that scene was wickedly cool. When Disa goes down into this newly opened cave and she finds that gem that rolled away from her, and she does a vocal thing, and what comes back is the guttural sounds of a Balrog awakening, and the way the water dances up from the vibrations. It was really a cool scene. Not gonna lie, like, they did a good job with the suspense here in this episode, and Bear McCreary's soundtrack is really really helping with that. Like at the end credits, I had a very very distinct, going back to Battlestar Galactica roots with the drums, and like, oh, this is we're carrying over that intensity into this credit sequence. Um, the other core storyline going on here, I didn't take show notes today. I literally picked up my notebook and went, "There's nothing here," and then I was like, "Oh, that's right," because I had a cat sitting on here while I was recording the episode. Um, so I'm trying to remember everything. The Numenor storyline. Um, Pharaohzone is basically hook, line, sinker, corrupt, evil dude who's going to reshape Numenor in his image, and he's talking about how telling his son, like, if you stand on the highest peak, you can see the gates to Valinor on a clear day, but only those with the keenest of eyes. A reminder that we will always be lesser than the elves and the Valar, and that we're always that's like a reminder in their arrogance of just smeared in our faces that no matter what heights we achieve as men, we will never be worthy of that. So he's got his bitterness in his heart. Ultimately, he does go down to the Palantir, but we don't know yet what he has seen. But he does go down to the Palantir and takes the cover off, and he stares at the stone. You know he touched it. You know he touched it. They didn't show you. They didn't show him touching it this episode, but you know he touched it. So he's gonna fall prey to the same magic. This leads to basically stripping of all the Sea Guard are getting stripped of their title, rank, and weapons. They're being disbanded, and the queen is basically living, excuse me, in this tower. It's early, guys. It's like 5 o'clock, something like that in the morning. Um, she convinces Elendil to not rise up and start a rebellion. She's like, you need to weather the storm, especially when she finds out, what he saw in the Palantir. Because what she saw was the destruction of the island. That's what her father had seen as well. But Isildur saw something different. He sees his son riding away from something, from a city. He catches a glimpse of his son, which means Elendil has seen a future beyond what the queen has ever seen. The queen has only ever seen death and destruction because she sees the end of Numenor. and she's not wrong in what she sees. I don't think they realize what the Palantir is showing in terms of possible futures, but the Queen latches on to Elendil's vision as proof that there is a way past the island being destroyed, or at least a hope for their people beyond the island being destroyed. And so she latches onto that. She's like, "You need to weather the storm. We need to get through this. We will find a way. Our destiny lies here, because your son is back there in Middle Earth. And if you saw your son alive in Middle Earth, that means you saw it. Your vision was there. So we have to go. So that's a lead up to something that's coming down the pipeline. So I think that's all the storylines here. What's really interesting is there's a moment in here where Sauron is talking to Celebrimbor about the men of Numenor, and he says the men of Numenor are, if I'm being honest, like they are the only men I fear. Um, and I think it's because they are the ones who are blessed by the Valar, right? So, and you know, this is the line of Elendil Isildur cut the ring from Sauron. Figure like they are, you know, tied to the elves in a way, tied to the Valar in a way that terrifies Sauron. So another great episode. I think that overall we're just seeing the spreading of corruption. Sort of a surprise thing towards the end, with Galadriel, with Adar talking to Galadriel, but I didn't capture you as a prisoner. I captured you to recruit you as a potential ally against a shared enemy, naming Sauron. Also, Elrond arriving to Gil-galad and telling him that the armies are there, and Gil-galad seeing a vision of of mountains and ruin and orcs and death and Elrond basically telling him Sauron is there, and he's like, we can't face Adar and Sauron at the same time. I have to, figure out how to make a choice. So there's a lot going on. It was a great episode. I'm enjoying this. It's going to be really interesting to see where the final 3 episodes go. In the meantime, I'd love to hear your thoughts on episode 5, so drop them down below. Of course, like, subscribe, hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Daily streams here and on Twitch. And stick around. We got more Rings of Power and, of course, all the other film reviews and TV show reviews that I do. So hopefully we'll see you in the next one. Until then, stay safe. Happy watching.